The school day started like any other, with the monotonous drone of the morning announcements and the shuffle of students settling into their desks. I was in the middle of jotting down notes in my physics class when the principal's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention, students and staff. This is not a drill. We are now in a lockdown. Lock the classroom doors, turn off the lights, and remain silent. I repeat, this is not a drill." The words sent a chill down my spine. Lockdowns were not uncommon, but they were typically just a precaution. This one felt different. My teacher, Mr. Anderson, moved quickly to secure the classroom. The lights went off, and the blinds were drawn. We huddled in the dark, the only illumination coming from the pale glow of the emergency exit sign. Mr. Anderson ushered us to the back of the classroom, away from the windows, and whispered for us to remain quiet. The air grew heavy with tension as we all tried to stifle our fear. We exchanged nervous glances, but the fear in Mr. Anderson's eyes was unmistakable. Time dragged on, and it felt like an eternity. We waited in the darkness, not knowing what was happening outside. Whispers and rumors circulated, but no one had any concrete information. I couldn't help but think about my little sister in the elementary school across the street. I hoped she was safe. As we waited, my mind wandered, and I couldn't help but remember the recent news reports of a dangerous criminal who had escaped from a nearby prison. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Could he be the reason for this lockdown? Minutes turned into hours, and the initial anxiety gave way to restlessness. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional muffled cough or a stifled sob. We had no access to our phones, and information was scarce. The uncertainty of the situation gnawed at me. Then, the intercom crackled to life again. It was the principal's voice, but there was a noticeable tremor in her tone. "We have received reports of a dangerous individual in the vicinity of the school. Law enforcement is on the scene. Please continue to shelter in place. Do not open the doors for anyone." The tension in the room grew thicker. Mr. Anderson, usually so composed, was visibly on edge. We huddled together, the darkness outside the classroom feeling increasingly menacing. My thoughts drifted back to my sister, and I couldn't help but fear for her safety. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the corridor, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and drawing closer. Mr. Anderson motioned for us to stay silent, but the fear in his eyes was palpable. The footsteps grew louder, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. The door to our classroom began to rattle, as if someone was trying to force it open. Panic swept through the room, and the whispered prayers of my classmates filled the air. Mr. Anderson, clutching a heavy textbook, moved toward the door, ready to defend us if necessary. Just as the door seemed on the verge of giving way, the footsteps abruptly receded, fading into the distance. The door stopped rattling, and we were once again enveloped in silence. We remained huddled in the darkness, none of us daring to speak. Hours passed, and the fear of the unknown continued to grip us. Had the intruder been scared away, or was he biding his time? The uncertainty was unbearable. It wasn't until several more hours had passed that the intercom crackled to life again. This time, it was a different voice, one that sent a shiver down my spine. "We have the school surrounded. Surrender peacefully, and no one else will get hurt." The voice belonged to the escaped convict, the man who had been terrorizing the area for weeks. The room fell into an eerie silence as his words sank in. We were trapped, held hostage in our own school by a dangerous criminal. Mr. Anderson, still clutching the textbook, whispered urgently to us, telling us to stay calm and quiet. But panic had already set in. The knowledge that we were at the mercy of a violent fugitive was paralyzing. As we continued to wait in the dark, the minutes turned into hours, and the school remained eerily silent. The police had taken up positions outside, and we could hear the distant sirens, but they seemed far away. It was as though we were in our own isolated pocket of terror. Then, another sound pierced the silence, the sound of sobbing coming from the corner of the room. It was a classmate, Sarah, who had been struggling to contain her fear. Her quiet sobs grew louder, and Mr. Anderson tried to comfort her, but it was no use. The fear had a vice grip on us all. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the hallway, and the door to our classroom burst open. A figure stepped into the room, shrouded in darkness. It was the fugitive, the dangerous criminal we had been warned about. He had found us. He moved slowly, the dim emergency exit sign casting an eerie glow on his face. His eyes were wild, and he clutched a knife in one hand. The room was filled with the sound of our terrified gasps and Sarah's sobs. He spoke in a low, menacing voice. "Nobody move, and nobody gets hurt." We were frozen in place, too terrified to react. The fugitive moved closer, his eyes scanning the room. He seemed unhinged, and the glint of the knife in the dim light was a chilling reminder of the danger we were in. Then, unexpectedly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. It was followed by the sound of shouting and a barrage of gunfire. The police had arrived, and chaos erupted in the hallway. The fugitive was distracted, torn between retreating and confronting the officers. In the confusion, Mr. Anderson seized the opportunity. With a swift motion, he lunged at the fugitive, tackling him to the ground. The knife clattered out of the fugitive's hand, and a struggle ensued. The police stormed into the room, guns drawn, and apprehended the fugitive. It was over, but the terror had left an indelible mark on all of us. As the school lockdown was lifted, and we were reunited with our families, a profound sense of relief washed over me. My sister from the elementary school was safe, and we were all alive. But the memories of those hours spent in fear and uncertainty would haunt me for the rest of my life. The school lockdown, meant to keep us safe, had become a nightmare, a harrowing experience that none of us would ever forget. It was a chilling reminder that danger can lurk where we least expect it, and that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones we live through.